Yeah. So, Mike, I think you're up next, unless you ceded the floor to Nikki to go next with the storybook stuff.
Nikki, what do you want to do? Are you? Oh, she's muted.
No, actually, just can't hear Nikki. So
that was super weird. She wasn't muted, but she was speaking and words weren't coming out.
Hold on.
Now you're working.
There you go.
Now it is. All right, my cat was leaning against the laptop earlier, so.
Because obviously.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, before I do have just a little thing this week because I didn't get to code much, but I also have 3 tickets for you, my friend, because no good deed goes unpunished, Brian. Number 1, I said that, it would be great to have a GUI version of this, but number 2, it would be neat to have an explorer then of the data in that GUI, kind of similar to what we saw in Drupal with the JSON API. And number 3, I would love the mapping function to be abstracted out so that maybe I'm mapping not to an element, but to something else. So it doesn't have to be take this data, map it to an element, because my big use case for that would then be the simple fields, and some of that data is really about translating from one object to another.
Yeah, so that's more of a function than an actual element in that.
So those are Magical Brian Genie. Those are my 3 wishes. You give me 1 ticket, I give you 3.
Hey, I mean, that's stuff that I can repurpose back into HAX then, because HAX does those types of things everywhere, and simple.
You do it to me, I do it to you.
So, I know.
So Potter, do you want me to be next then?
Yeah, go for it.
All righty. Let me just share my screen then. Okay, so can we see my screen?
Yep.
All right. So the thing that I did just this morning, because I didn't have any other time to do things and it made me sad, is I have this this code editor now working within Storybook. There were also other things, like in the studio, this little progress donut wasn't working, and the problem was not the dynamic imports. Those were working. It was pieces like this within the code editor, this live path piece and pointing to node modules that I couldn't, number 1, couldn't get packed up, and number 2, I had issues with making sure that the path was the correct path, whether I was using Storybook locally or when I was packing it up and uploading it to our site. So within Storybook utilities, let me show you here. So this live path data is set in Monaco element. Hold on. There's live path. There's an if statement here somewhere. It might be, it's in code editor. So in setting live path in the code editor, it's first going to look for a window WC global base path. And so that was my secret into hijacking that. So in Storybook utilities, so that it's only hijacked for when we're using Storybook, I actually, anything that uses Storybook utilities is now going to set that base path. The challenge was that when I'm testing these things locally, the directory structure is different from when I would build a Storybook and upload it. So all I did was I just tested to see if it already included node modules in the base path, and left it as is if it did. If not, I just added node modules, and that was able to include that element. And then of course I needed to use the copy for rollup to be able to make sure I got all of those pieces, because they weren't getting assembled otherwise. So that is the little thing that I did with Storybook. And I also added image compare slider, which we built a long time ago, and you can compare between 2 images. Let me go to the properties. You can either set it as opacity, or if you turn opacity off, you can set it as this wipe effect instead. So I'm getting little low-hanging fruit elements out of the way to get up on our instance of Storybook.
Is
so that there are more.
opacity a new thing? I don't remember that being in that element.
I did that when I converted it to lit element, but
Oh, nice.
because it's like the tree falling in the middle of the woods, because there was no Storybook working until the OpenWC stuff, and until Lars was very helpful in answering some questions about packing up these third-party pieces. I had kind of given up on getting these demos, because every time I touched Storybook up until the OpenWC stuff, I would lose a week and a half of my life. And then the next time we updated our shit, it was like, oh no, everything's screwed again. And, it was, time to relearn Webpack, and this roll up stuff with the OpenWC has been way easier to handle. So now I'm kind of motivated to update these things, and you can now see that you can now see what features are actually in them. And one of the things that has helped me is by seeing those features, because I've tried to make the demos cover all bases, but some of this stuff I have randomly generating. And so as I go in and look, it's also randomly giving me things to look at and realize I might need to fix. So I feel like it's time well spent. But that's it. That's what I did in this morning, since the rest of my week was taken.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Even as you just add, one or two more every few days, like the Storybook's looking great.
Yeah, and it was like I asked the question about my issue, and Lars was on it like that, and I asked follow-up questions, and it was like it was really great to have that level of help and not have to burn half my life in Storybook hell. So, yay! Because I'm not getting any younger.